This is IACA's Global Conversation, a podcast dialogue about topics of interest to courts and court administration with court leaders from around the world. Brought to you by the International Association for Court Administration. This episode is proudly sponsored by Synergy International Systems, with the capacity and passion to deliver efficient systems, empowering impact-driven organizations. For more information, go to their website at www.synesys.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Loesch, the president of the International Association for Court Administration, fondly known as IACA. I want to welcome you to IACA's second podcast. We have a great panel of subject matter experts who will be sharing their experiences on the important subject of performance management. I want to give my personal thanks to Synergy for sponsoring this podcast. And I also want to thank Peter Kiefer for not only hosting this podcast, but for also working his magic behind the scenes to actually produce it and make it all happen. I know you're anxious to hear from our panel of experts. So Peter, take it away.
Measuring judicial performance is a burning question for many countries around the globe. How to balance the need for timely case resolution with the necessity for just results is a question many court experts have often pondered. Today, our panel of international court professionals will discuss the implications of measuring judicial performance. I'm Pete Kiefer, and welcome to the International Association for Court Administration and IACA's Global Conversation podcast series. This episode delves into a number of questions about measuring judicial performance. How do you use the performance measures? Who gets to see the data? What effect does automating judicial performance measurement have? Do you tie judicial performance to an overall strategic plan? And what advice do these court professionals have for the rest of us? I'm joined today by a distinguished international panel of professional court experts. Angeline Rutizana, Inspector General for the Judiciary of Rwanda. Niseen Karungi, e-justice expert with Synergy International Systems. Dr. Azil Zimo, advisor to the Chief Justice and Ministry of Justice in Bahrain. And Thomas Bruton, clerk of court for the United States District Court in the Northern District of Illinois. Thank you all for joining today's podcast. Tell us a little bit about your country's court system. How many courts operate, from local courts up to the appellate and Supreme Court? How are they funded? And how are judges selected? Dr. Zimo?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for this great opportunity. I come from Bahrain, and it's a very small country where we have around the 60 courts. Most of our courts are kind of in the same complex. There are a few courts that just outside the main complex, like the family or what we call the Sharia courts. In total, like I said, there are 60. There are a number of courts that are first instance, and they are covers commercial, civil, criminal, labor, and rental disputes, as well as some different specialization in various sectors like criminal courts, such as anti-money laundering and economic crimes, etc. Our courts, we are run by the Supreme Judicial Council, which is headed by the Chief Justice. It has a financial independence, complete financial independence, and is funded by the state in general, but separated from the government. Our judges are appointed by this body, and all the work of the judges is managed by the Supreme Judicial Council, which has a number of judges, current and retired judges, as part of that composition. Our judges are selected through an open selection process where there is an application made, then exams, various interviews and trainings, and the lucky few actually managed to get through the very extensive assessment program and find themselves being lucky enough to be judges.
Inspector Rutizana?
As you said, I'm from Rwanda. Rwanda is also a small country in Africa. In Rwanda, we have courts at different levels, or operating at different levels. on one hand, we have ordinary courts, which are starting from the lowest to the highest. We have the primary courts, we have intermediate courts, we have high court, and then we have the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. And as you understand, primary court, we hear cases at trial level, and those cases will be appealed to the intermediate court, and sometimes, depending on the conditions, in the high court. On the other side, you have what we call specialized courts. Those include commercial courts. We have the commercial tribunal and the commercial high court, which means that commercial cases will start in the commercial tribunal and then be appealed to the high court. If the law allows, they can go even up to the Court of Appeal. Among the specialized courts, we also have the military tribunals. We have the military tribunal and then the military high court. Regarding the funding of our courts in general, courts are funded from the national budget, but we have a financial autonomy granted by the Constitution. However, in some cases, our partners, being national or international, can also intervene in funding some of our activities if they meet their area of interest. Regarding the selection of judges, we have two modes, if I can say. For primary courts, intermediate courts, they are selected through an open process where we have an application, and those who apply and are pre-selected, they go through exams. We have a written exam and then an interview, which are organized by the High Council of the Judiciary. And then those who pass those exams are appointed by the High Council of the Judiciary. On the other side, judges from the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court will be appointed by the President of the Republic after consulting the Cabinet and the High Council of the Judiciary.
Does your court system have a strategic plan? And how many years into the future does it project? What's the current plan's focus? And how often is it updated? Tom Bruton?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. We are fortunate. I'm part of the United States federal judiciary, and we do have a strategic plan for the federal judiciary. The Judicial Conference of the United States has a plan. Over the last decade, it's been modified about 4 times, I would estimate. And the plan lays out core values for the federal judiciary. Those core values are strategies that outline the importance of what the federal judiciary will model for fair and impartial justice. And I'll go over very briefly what those 7 core values are. Number 1, the rule of law. 2, equal justice. 3, judicial independence. 4, diversity and respect. Accountability, excellence, and service. That is the strategic plan for the federal judiciary. It's fairly simple. There's goals. It's laid out. It's shared. It's public, and it's in my words, it's transparent, and it's a living document that does get modified. And so it's tied together to strategies for moving the judiciary forward as well.
Inspector Rudizana?
Yes, of course, the Rwandan judiciary also has a strategic plan, which I can define as a tool developed to guide interventions towards the achievement of our vision. Usually this strategic plan was developed for a period of 5 years, but currently the strategic plan we have covers a period of 7 years, that is from 2018 to 2024. And this was done to align the strategic plan with the National Transformation Strategy. The focus of our strategic plan is generally to provide timely and quality justice, which is actually the vision of the judiciary of Rwanda. And as you understand, annually we develop an action plan, which is based on that strategic plan. It is updated once during the midterm review, and it will provide the strategies, interventions, targets, indicators to monitor and evaluate the achievements of these strategic objectives. Thank you.
We also in Bahrain have a strategic plan. Actually, we just recently completed the first cycle of 5 years, and I've just updated a new strategic plan for the next 3 years. Our strategic plan is also a living document. The initiatives that are included in the plan are set out in an action plan, but also sometimes due to recent events, for example, like COVID, there are things that get added that were not really in your mind when you made the strategic plan. That becomes a necessity to continue the justice or in the country. So we've added lots of things that have become very current. I know we talk about automation later on. Automation is, I think, become the backbone to any judicial system now. And so our strategic plan concentrates quite heavily on how to develop automation and make it most successful, and among obviously ensuring justice and competence as well as excellence and integrity.
Are the measures tied to the court system's vision or strategic plan? Inspector Rudazana?
Definitely, they are part of the results framework of our strategic plan, and they help to assess the performance achieved in terms of providing timely and quality justice, as I said before. So we set different strategies, measures, and indicators from the general vision. And the measures set in the strategic plan are the ones to be implemented by judges in their day-to-day activities. And of course, those are the ones to be measured every quarter and every year.
Tom Bruton?
Pete, I think I would answer the question yes and no. In the United States, judges have complete independence, judicial independence. But we use those statistics that are published to make sure that we have enough resources, to make sure that there's enough staffing, to make sure that there are enough judges. What I would say is those statistics are analyzed and that they're carefully analyzed. One of the statistics that they monitor closely to make sure that we have enough judgeships in the districts is the weighted caseload, to make sure that we have enough judgeships within each district. And so to answer the question, that would be a yes, but then I want to be careful and make sure I'm clear that judicial independence is very important within the United States.
Dr. Zemo?
It's a very interesting point that Tom makes. I don't see there is a particular conflict between judicial performance and judicial independence. We hold our, in Bahrain, as much as we use our judicial performance measures in the management of the backlog and in the cases. Judicial independence of both as a judiciary as well as individual judges is extremely respected, and it's extremely important. And I think that's the case for almost any judiciary. If your judges are not independent, you don't have a judiciary. It's as simple as this. They are absolutely independent. However, it's really important that we focus on judicial independence in the sense that we also provide a service. It's still a judiciary that provides service to the people. And that's something that's very important. And I think over the years in many countries, that hasn't been the case. The judiciary has always been seen as kind of beyond the kind of customer satisfaction sort of thing of the or public confidence. And it's always been something I've worked for many jurisdictions with many judiciaries, but you know, the idea of a judge when to just even discuss with them something like judicial performance, that's something for a long time was a taboo. So I appreciate the point that Tom makes that it is a fine line, and I absolutely respect the fact there is a very fine line between maintaining judicial independence and judges' independence to adjudicate cases in the way they see most appropriate, as well at the same time ensuring that cases are moving and people are getting a final judgment. I think one of the most important cornerstones to judicial performance that we look at is that justice delayed is justice denied. So if something is going to take many years for you finally to get a judgment, I'm not necessarily sure that even if it's a perfect judgment, you as a litigant would be particularly satisfied with that. And even further, in the business world, time no longer allows for that to happen. So even though I kind of didn't answer your question, I just felt like I needed to build on Tom's comment. But on that point, we do include judicial performance as part of our vision and strategic plan. And it is how to make the environment for the judges better to help them achieve more efficient justice.
We're going to break away for a minute to hear from our sponsor, Synergy International Systems.
The vision for the justice sector is to enable expedited disposition of cases that come to the court system. We have a backlog problem which we need to overcome. We also have a long list of reserved judgments which we need to overcome. The objective is to deal with those two problems, and the steps are now being taken. And I think we will be looking at a justice system that people can be looking forward to.
With Synergy, I think we may have found a solution that will help us in achieving our vision. IACMS is a very important and transitional system.
ICMS has got features that I've not seen before. It will answer a whole lot of our questions or help solve some of our problems.
It will change the way we do things. It will help us to become more efficient. Our record keeping will be more accurate, and our workflow will be more organized, more efficient and more effective.
ICMS will automate almost everything, and that's exciting.
We're back with our panel talking about judicial performance. How often is the performance measure data reported? Who looks at the data? And what types of decisions are made based on the data reported? Do you publish the information to the general public? Tom Bruton?
So the data is readily available publicly online. It is available, it's reported, the due dates are the end of March and end of September every year. And then it's published after it's compiled. Who looks at it? It's publicly available, but let me give you an example of how it could be used. Congress could look at it, and they could look at it to determine for judgeships. They could say, well, the weighted caseload in this particular district exceeds the acceptable level, and we should be looking at that for additional judgeships. That would just be one example of how the data could be used and that we've been referencing today.
Inspector Rudizana?
Thank you. The performance measure data are generally reported quarterly, but if need arises, we can also report. They can also be reported when we need to see how our courts are performing. We can do the report monthly or after 2 months. So, but generally it is done quarterly. And then at the end of the year, we do a general report. With the introduction of the IECMS, the integration electronic case management we talked about a few minutes ago, it was introduced with the aim of also promoting self-evaluation, because the system will allow each individual judge to assess himself, to continually assess himself, to assess his or her performance. And this can also allow the immediate superior to the judge to assess the performance of the judge. The inspectorate can also use the data to assess, and sometimes even the office of the Chief Justice if need arises. And from those assessments, we can take decisions, and decision will vary depending on the outcome of the data. The decision may include the increase of judges or researchers for judges. Sometimes you can even decide to combine some courts if there is a need. We can decide whether judges need a training in this field, depending on what the report showed. For the publication, I would say that we publish them in our annual report, and that annual report is on the website of the judiciary and anyone can access it. But I would like to mention that we publish the data which are the data for courts. We don't publish data for individual judges. So those who wish can access the data on the website because they are included in the annual report.
Dr. Zemo?
We also publish our measures annually in a report, in an annual report that's available on the website. We also have a press conference for our Chief Justice every year around the beginning of the year, usually around mid-January. That way he discusses those measures. Like it was explained, we don't publish information for individual judges. However, judges are able to look at their own performance. They have their own dashboard that actually they are able to see how many cases they've got, how they've dealt with them, and in numbers. I'm talking purely numbers here. That dashboard, like I said, is instantaneous. So it's live feed from everything that comes in. As something is registered or completed, it will show. You are able to use the dashboard to change the date, for example. So if you want to see your performance or performance of any court for the last 6 months, you will be able to do that instantly by doing that. Like I explained before, that is used mainly in order to decide on allocation of cases and how many courts we need, as well as if we need more judges, for example, in a very similar way as Angeline and Tom have explained in their own courts. Obviously, judicial performance measures is an essential part of budget planning. You know, that's one of the great things about it. You're able to do budget planning through it. I think what also we have managed to do with it is identify areas of pain, clogs in the system. And often the clogs in the system are things you cannot see if you don't have this overall information. And particular court cases are constantly delayed. You have a deep analysis of that, and you discover that there are, for example, this particular case relies heavily on expert testimony. And the issue with the expert testimony that would sometimes take longer than other forms of evidence. And that has been very useful in trying to help the process, the whole judicial process, and moving things forward.
Now, several of your country's court performance measurement systems are automated. Automation can be an enormous advantage to tracking judicial performance. Automation can also be very expensive and primarily benefits only large urban courts. What efforts are underway to bring the benefits of automated performance management to rural courts? Inspector Rudazana?
I would start by saying that in our judicial system, automation is not kind of something new, because we somehow started it in some years back in 2004 when we introduced the system of computer per person, I mean per judge or per court registrar. And then in 2011, we introduced the electronic filing in courts. And in 2016, we introduced the integrated electronic case management system, which is the system we talked about before. So I would say that because of the use of IECMS now in all courts in Rwanda, the judiciary is putting much efforts to allow courts either in urban areas or in rural areas to be able to use the system without any problem. And we have been lucky because the use of IT is also the vision of the country, and it has been a bit easy for us because that is also the vision for the country, and the necessary infrastructure is not necessarily in the urban areas, but also in rural areas. We have somehow what the court needs to be able to use the system of automation. So I would say that though not everything is perfect to today, but we are putting so much effort to allow all courts in the country to be able to work in a smooth way using the information technology. But still, we understand that we still have a lot to do to improve how things are. But I can say that we are on a good track. Thank you.
Dr. Zemo?
Well, we don't have rural courts in Bahrain, but automation it's been a godsend during COVID. We were managed to keep our courts open all the way through COVID due to the fact that we were able to provide automation and ability of litigants as well as advocates and lawyers to access courts and make applications, etc. Also, on the issue of judicial management and judicial measures, it's automation gives you a new amount of information that you never thought was possible. You know, you are able to identify, for example, how long does it take for advocates to submit applications or make pleadings, etc. That kind of information wasn't really possible before automation. How many applications, and I mean the simple applications that judges are given in a given case. That also, it's always been part of the workload of judges, but I just feel like traditionally that wasn't something that would be considered as part of their workload. So I think automation has managed. It is absolutely expensive, and it takes time to get it right. I absolutely agree. But it's definitely worth the effort. And the more you develop your automation, I think there are more room for improvement, as well as knowledge information that you can actually build on.
Naisine Karungi?
Yeah, like Inspector General had said, the rural areas for us were also equipped, because at this moment, most of the rural courts actually have the facilities. But nevertheless, looking at the citizens, both the illiterate and the computer illiterate, some measures are put in place to include them as well. For example, having the system in Kinyarwanda, which is the local language that they would easily understand, and the ability for the system to send them SMS notification, and also numerous trainings for people that can facilitate them. I have to mention here that when we started implementing the case management system, it was vital for us to phase out the system in different phases, starting obviously with urban courts, but also phasing down to the rural courts. And finally, going into the future, we are looking at incorporating the USSD so people can easily follow up the status of their cases using USSD codes.
What safeguards do you have in place to prevent your automated system from being hacked? Naisine Karungi?
First of all, the system is stored in the National Data Center, and that provides hardware security and network security, but also the system has its own application level security and database level security. And the best part about this system is that it allows to give permissions to individuals depending on their roles and the status of the case, but also on a level, on a field level kind of permission. So at a given state of the case, different individuals are able to see different things and operate on different things. But also I have to mention that security is relative. You know, the higher we go to secure our systems, the higher also hackers go. So we kind of have to always do kind of security checks, which is what we do. To make sure that our system complies with our international security standards.
Tom Bruton?
IT security is of utmost importance. I think we've all heard of the well-known issues that we've had, and they're ongoing. And I think that this is going to be in the forefront for many years. And if we don't address IT security in the judiciary, that is our integrity. We need to be sure that we keep things confidential. We need to be sure that we are protecting not only the data that we've been talking about, but the draft opinions, for example. And that's a challenge that we have every day. We struggle with that. You know, we have several employees and systems in place that we're spending a tremendous amount of money and resources to try to protect it, but it feels like that's an uphill battle every day. And as much as you'd like to say that, you know, you're on the cutting edge and you're staying ahead, I feel like every month you're reading about a new piece of software or a new technology that you have to get to protect the integrity of the IT system. So I'm always interested to learn more from my colleagues and know what we should be doing, and I hope that there's I would suggest that maybe that's one of the next podcasts that we do is IT security.
What piece of advice do you have for folks around the world joining us on today's podcast? Inspector Rudazana?
The use of technology is the way to go, especially in these times of COVID. I think we have learned that without technology, we can do nothing. That is my piece of advice.
Naisine Karungi?
Yeah, I would say that the time to adopt technology is now, if you have not yet adopted it. And that if COVID has proved anything to us is that the use of technology is the only way to go going into the future. And I need to add that the Synergy International Systems team is very happy to partner with you in helping you achieve the goal of digitization, whether you want to start or to maintain. The Synergy team is here to support.
Dr. Zemo?
It's really hard to follow those two comments by the two ladies. Of course, automation, no doubt. I'll just add 2 or 3 more points. The first point is the advice for anybody that hasn't started with this, whether technology or without technology. I think it's almost impossible to do without technology, actually, to be fair. So starting with technology, but also starting somewhere. Judicial measures develop. You have a few that you really need, and as you use them, you discover you need more, and you can slowly develop those judicial performance measures. So start anywhere, just get started and get used to in the mindset of using data and statistics in decision making. And that's not something that comes naturally, especially in a place like the judiciary. You know, all judiciary in the world are difficult to change. And their mindset is traditional. And that's, that's the way they've been trained, and this is how they it's the point of their jobs. But it's a very important point to change the mindset. It takes a bit of time and for you to be able to use statistics in order to make all kinds of decisions about the management of the judiciary. And I think the other 2 points I'd like to make is the point I made about next logical step. I think in the plan, it's something we didn't have in our plan really, but in the plan, you need to have tangible measures that does deal with quality and does deal with predictability. I think that's extremely important. And the final point for me is that I read an article a few weeks ago and had another podcast about that justice is not just the courts. And that's something that I've been working for a very long time within the courts. Whenever I think of the word justice, it always thinks of it within our court systems, our judges, but actually justice is a lot wider than that. And I think it's really important to think of dispute resolution in general, because actually statistically, the percentage of people that end up in court that have actually had any real dispute is quite minimal. So I think maybe we need to start expanding our thinking going forward and how to ensure dispute resolution is efficient even in other areas. I think it was mentioned mediation, for example, but also other forms of solutions that we might find useful, but also include judicial performance measures to that as well.
Tom Bruton?
It's a hard act to follow with my colleagues here. Let me see if I can summarize just a few thoughts. I'll just add, be transparent no matter what the data says. No matter what the data says, be transparent. And I would say continue to monitor. Continue to monitor. My colleagues were right. If you haven't started, start, but then continue to monitor. And I will say, if the data and the metrics show that you need to adjust, be willing to adjust.
I want to thank Inspector General Rudizana, Naisine Karungi, Tom Bruton, and Dr. Azil Zemo for their insights and advice on how they're addressing the issues about measuring judicial performance. I also want to thank our sponsor, Synergy International Systems. This has been IACA's Global Conversation podcast series. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for joining us today. IACA's Global Conversation is a podcast series on topics of interest to courts and court administration from around the world. Today's episode will be available on IACA's website, on the Court Leader website, on YouTube, on Spotify, and on iTunes. Links are also available on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Heard an interesting comment by a guest you would like to listen to again, but don't want to go through the entire episode? The Additional Resources section contains a time marker sheet showing when each question was asked. Just find the question you are interested in, see when it was asked, then you can fast forward to that time in the episode and listen to the responses. Don't have time to watch an episode? The Global Conversation is also available in an audio format, so you can listen to it whenever you have time. You never have to miss an episode. I'm Pete Kiefer, and on behalf of our guests and the International Association for Court Administration, thanks for making us part of your day. The views, information, and opinions expressed during this episode are solely those of the host and the individual presenters. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the International Association for Court Administration.